Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We'll start the meeting. Please stand and join me for the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a new student board member, Maggie Muller. And so at this time, if you could come forward and we'll swear you in. So, Mom's coming to take pictures. Okay. So repeat after me. Okay. I, Maggie Muller, affirm that I will support.
I, Maggie Muller, affirm that I will support.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
And of this state.
And of this state.
And that I will discharge faithfully.
And that I will discharge faithfully.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
Of student school board member.
Of student school board member.
Of Independent School District 241.
Of Independent School District 241.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, we'll begin the evening with our open forum. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and address the board at this time? Okay, we'll next do our public hearing regarding the tax abatement for a new home construction program. So is there...
Home of David. Now, if anybody has any comments on the abatement process for either of these properties, now is the time that they have the opportunity to speak. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have entered into an agreement with the city and the county for a 5-year abatement for new construction, and that's what both of these are. So that's what this period of the meeting's about.
Okay, any questions? Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, which is approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion to do so? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to reports, Dr. Funk.
What's that? The consent, Ken? First of all, we want to do the consent agenda.
Sorry.
Yep.
We need to approve the consent items. Is there a motion to do so? Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, motion second. All those in favor of the consent items signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, now, Dr. Funk.
Most of my time tonight is going to be spent later in the board meeting when we talk about suspension data. A couple things to note, unless the school board members, the students want to talk about it. You guys want to talk about homecoming this week? Yeah. Between the two of you? Okay, I won't steal their thunder then about what's happening with homecoming this week, but we are, I think, into our 5th week of the year. Mid-quarter was last year, and it has been a really remarkably good start to the school year. So that's all I've got tonight.
Okay. Next we have board members. Neil, you want to start us off?
Well, as you know, you and Dave and I attended a finance committee meeting, which Lori will probably do justice to quite well. The other thing that occurs to me is that yesterday it was my happiness to be a part of Hayward Lutheran Church's joining a program along with other churches to support the backpack program. And we had a typical Lutheran dinner fundraiser for that. So I think all the churches that have jumped on board here and have assisted in that program should be recognized, and we should appreciate their efforts.
Thank you, agree 100%. Jill?
I visited the preschool class that's at First Lutheran this year, and it's a beautiful facility. They have it set up really nicely. Had a great time there with the preschoolers. Also attended facilities committee meeting where some stakeholders were there, coaches, et cetera, talking about the new complex. And I also attended the community facilitated presentation that was at the Historical Society about powering up your boards, and that had a lot of good information. So I'm happy to share that with the board if anyone's interested. Thank you.
Other than the facilities meeting and the finance meeting, I also attended the Minnesota School Board Association Insurance Trust Board, which I'm elected to in Chaska about 2 weeks ago.
I have nothing to report.
Okay. I also attended the facility committee meeting. We had a meeting with LAEA and then the finance committee meeting last week. So now we'll move on to our student board members. We'll let the veteran go first. Gigi?
So this week is homecoming. Started today. We have dress-up days every day. So today was Farmer Day. And then it's camo way back Wednesday, class colors, and cherry and blue. So that's all fun. There's lots of games going on. So you can find that on Big 9 if you guys want to attend. Musicals getting into gear. Anything else, Maggie? Okay.
Okay. Maggie, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that report? Okay.
Tell us, Maggie, one thing we're doing different this year, not the parade. What are they doing on Friday?
Oh, they're doing like a carnival thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called.
That's Carnival, I think.
Yeah, it's just like the teams have like booths. And
So
yeah, that should be fun.
Right at Hammer Complex. They're going to be doing it from 4 to 5:30 on Friday afternoon.
Yep.
So something a little different this year.
Laura?
Perfect. Welcome. I'm Laura Wong, and I'm 7th grade ELA teacher at Southwest. For the ALA report, for the current week, obviously homecoming is in full effect. It's fun to see each and every school putting their own grade level appropriate twist on dress-up days. Today at Southwest, the theme was for students to dress as teachers and teachers to dress as students. There were some very amusing students, to say the least. It's funny to see their take on things. And there were also some very comfortable teachers, myself included. As the students brought up and Dr. Funk brought up, on Friday it's going to be the Homecoming Carnival held at the Hammer Complex. It is open to the community, so everyone is welcome. It's from 4 to 5:30, and it's really fun because each and every sports group and a lot of our teams and the little groups at the high school are welcome to create different stuff. I know girls soccer is doing face painting, hockey program, girls hockey is doing kind of a shooting game. Boys soccer is doing an almost obstacle course, I believe, but lots of fun stuff to do there. And this will be a great way for us to say farewell to the existing Hammer Complex or stadium, as the demolition will begin following the fall 2018 sports season. And they would also like to extend a welcome to all the alumni to come over to celebrate, especially those who have fond memories of playing, cheering, etc. at the Hammer Stadium. At Southwest in particular, this year the majority of teachers at Southwest are teaching an elective, and students have a wide array of choices to choose from to extend their learning outside their core classes. And personally, I am not one of those teachers that get to teach an elective, but instead I get to teach an additional class to some English language learners. Specifically in my English language arts classes, I focus on having students read, write, speak, listen, and think about different aspects of English. In my EL classes, my focus is on the writing, speaking, and listening, and thinking aspects, when my co-teacher focuses more on the reading aspect of it. students in my roster have already made some huge gains, but there's always more room to practice when it comes to the very complex language of English itself. A big upcoming event for ALEA, it's the 3rd annual Gobble Wobble. It's a 5K taking place on Saturday, November 18th, with the starting and finishing point being right here at Brookside. Proceeds from that help to go support the ALEA Scholarship Fund. Anyone from the public is welcome to walk, run, or wobble your way to the finish line. Right now, online registration is currently open. And if you choose not to partake in the run, walk, or wobble itself, ALEA would like to invite you anyways just to come cheer on. I know that in previous years there's been some pretty silly costumes and people have a lot of fun with it. And also the fall sports season is underway. I know tonight I'm dressed in my coaching attire because I'm off to finish up with a makeup game, and I know kind of like fall and spring sports kind of get a little iffy with weather, but we're hoping for a beautiful night of soccer and fun. Thank you.
That was a fantastic report. A lot of information there. So, for those of you that can, please enjoy the homecoming activities. Moving on to effective and efficient operations, 8.1 is the resolution approving property tax abatement. Lori.
Mr. Chair, board members, and Dr. Funk, for your consideration is approval of the resolution regarding this proposed property tax abatement. As Dr. Funk mentioned, it is a 5-year period of abatement, and the 2 properties were already highlighted earlier in the board agenda. Do want to point out that the tax abatement is limited to the increase in property taxes resulting from the improvement of the property. Any questions?
Any questions? I'd entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the resolution approving the property tax abatement signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Next we have the certified levy proposed for 2018 to pay in 2019. Lori?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Funk, for your consideration would be approving the proposed 18 pay 19 levies, and I'm recommending that we certify it with the words at maximum. What that means is upon proving, as the figures are calculated today, there's always a chance MBDE could come through with a slight tweak on some line. It could be a small adjustment line. Right now it's looking very accurate, but there is that chance a very small amount may come through, and then that at maximum allows us to use the actual updated amount if it is changed as of September 30th. Most likely it is totally already complete. I want to highlight some of the changes. In total, the proposed levy is showing an increase of $459,675.98, which is a 5.5% increase. And there's a variety of areas that are involved in this, and it was reviewed at the Finance Committee level. And I'm going to go on to the next page here. The area of increase it's broken down in a couple different categories. The general ed revenue category, the levy increase there is $171,000. And there's a variety of components involved in that category of increase for the gen ed revenue. Our pupil units did increase from last year's levy. We also have general ed formula updates and also updates in the state aid levy split. I do want to emphasize that the gen ed revenue, a great majority of that revenue comes in the form of state aid, but there is a local levy split component to that. This particular category of increase basically reflects $45 per pupil unit of an increase. LTFM, which is long-term facility maintenance, that category is reflecting an increase of $169,731. And right now, that application was loaded from the data we reviewed in June. The LTFM plan was approved by the board in June, and that was reflecting the full LTFM entitlement. So that is what is showing on the levy. You may recall last year we under-levied in this category, and so that's the main reason for the increase, is getting it back into the full entitlement level. I do also want to point out that LTFM, state aid is a huge component overall of this formula. State aid comes up to 51.8% of the total LTFM revenue we receive is in the form of state aid. The remaining piece is levy, and so that's an important thing to know. And it does fund important parts of our projects regarding updating and maintaining our facilities. Just to give you a reference point, the LTFM total revenue is $1.4 million, and like I said, majority of that comes in the form of state aid. Two buildings that we are seeing in our 1920 plan. So this levy now that is being proposed is actually for next fiscal year. That would be the 1920 year. What? So as the 1920 year. So what I'm saying is, it kicks into place July 1, 2019. Yeah. Okay. This is the acronym we use these types of phrases in funding. So. Okay. So the two areas is Brookside has a large planned project of $380,000, as well as middle school had a project of $865,000. That was already, like I mentioned, reviewed and approved by the board in June, and now it's reflecting in the levy. Another area of increase is the vocational category, which is career and tech ed is the most updated term for that. And we have some really good news in this particular category. We have increased the number of vocationally funded programs. I must say Jeff Halverson at the high school did a lot of work on this. We were able to add the different additional programs of construction occupations and communications technology occupations. And then also we were able to increase the number of FTEs that could be allocated to this particular program and actually be eligible for additional funding. And so this is really the first year we're seeing all those efforts come into a funding increase, which is $34,000. Another area of adjustment is debt service excess fund balance adjustment. And so what this is all about is the state legislature has set parameters where they do monitor the amount of fund balance and debt service. And so what they calculate is, it's all pre-calculated, what they will determine as a reduction of debt service excess fund balance, and it's based on your principal and interest times 5%. So in 17, pay 18, we had a larger reduction per se of $232,000. The reduction calc for the 18 pay 19 is $156,000. That even though they're both reductions, we had less of a reduction in this current levy document that we're reviewing tonight. So therefore, it results in a levy increase of $75,000. And again, that is just regarding the excess fund balance. And so I just want to emphasize as well that the debt service category is right on line with what we anticipated. And in the next sheet, I'll address that building bond that was issued in 2018 in a moment. But other areas, there's many areas, but they all net out to about $8,000 of an increase. So overall, it's a $259,000 increase in the levy, 5.9%, or 5.59, excuse me, % increase.
Questions?
So just again, the 2018 A and B GO building bonds were issued for the Hammerfield Upgrade Halverson Gym. I just want to emphasize the debt service payments do not kick in until 2020 pay 2021. So there's no impact in this 2018 pay 19 levy.
Lori,
Questions?
what's the increase on a $100,000 home for a taxpayer on a monthly basis?
So the increase for a $100,000 home for this proposed levy is $2.72 a month.
I would just add that the three of us walked the parking lot because the question was asked if you were going to lower anything, it would be the LTFM. And so if that was lowered, what would you eliminate as far as a facility improvement? And that was the parking lot here. Now, the parking lot up front is good, and that was done a few years ago. But if you take a walk around the building, it's not in very good shape. And so we took that walk, and so it was a good meeting. Had a lot of questions. Any comments from Neil or Dave?
Just wanted, Lori, give us a little history on the LTFM with the state, because it's only been a couple years now that they've actually given us some money back or paid for part of that, part of our building repairs or whatever.
Just to emphasize again that LTFM, the aid levy split on that, 51% state aid, 48% local levy. And LTFM, the funding stream, allowed the districts to improve and increase the number of projects they could get done. And so that has been phased into a little bit higher level. The legislature, when they updated this formula stream, what they did was they got rid of what used to be called deferred maintenance and health and safety, and they rolled it into this new long-term facility maintenance funding stream. And they increased the funding for this category based on what it used to be under the deferred maintenance and health and safety categories. And so, for example, it's now up to the fully funded level of $1.4 million, and it's taken us a couple years to be phased up into that. And so the legislature purposely put that in place in a multi-year fashion so that it wasn't such a spike in 1 year. Now, of course, this district did choose to under-levy last year. So last year we had like $1.2 million in our LTFM plan for the 18-19 year. So just to kind of give you a little background there. So now going forward, as you may recall from the June board meeting, ongoing starting 1920 on to the next 10 years, this levy that is the total funding total for LTFM is estimated to be continue to be at the 1.4 million. So going forward after this year, it should be pretty level as far as the aid levy split, assuming they don't change that percentage, which they probably would keep that as it is.
Questions?
Lori, in that category, LTFM, as I understand it, if we under levy in that category, then that diminishes the amount we would receive from the state in that category.
That is correct. So that is an important consideration. You do lose the corresponding state aid when you under levy.
So you mentioned that on a house of $100,000, it'll be $2 something a month that the taxes will go up. Do you know what the taxes are right now from this on a house for $100,000? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you're also a number genius. So you might just know it.
I'll take that compliment.
Oh, I don't know if you can do that.
So for payable 2018, so when I say that, the taxes that were approved by the board last fall for payable 18 for a $100,000 home, $430.
A year?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
And if we were to approve a lesser amount, how would that, in general ed, how would that affect general ed revenue?
So you're asking if we would under levy in the category of gen ed revenue? That would, I'd pretty much have to analyze and get back to you on that. It's a very, very complicated formula, which involves many pages.
You said it was about $45 per pupil unit
Right.
in general ed. So if we under levied there, say, 10% or 20%, then would the corresponding per pupil dollar amount, it would work against us in the general budget, which we pay, most everything in the district with.
Right. An under levy in the gen ed area, the gen ed revenue area, would be very, very difficult operationally. The gen ed formula is what pays and funds majority of our operating expenses in the general fund, of which, over 80% of our costs are for people, because we're a service organization. So if we were to under levy and not levy the full gen ed revenue, quite frankly, this board would be saying that they are going to be making cuts, staff cuts. If we under
Or
levy,
we'd be
that
back
means
out for referendums,
and so it would
like
be
we've done in the past.
very concerning financially if the board would not approve the full operating, the full gen ed revenue levy.
And technology is not a piece of that, is that correct, of the gen ed?
Well, gen ed includes operating capital, and so technology, a big chunk of technology is charged to operating capital, and a part of it is charged to the unassigned general fund. And so that gen ed formula does fund technology in those buckets. Yep.
So that could be another opportunity to lower costs rather than cutting staff.
Of course, everything could be looked at, but even with technology, we need to operate. So even with, for example, needing to replace Chromebooks, we need to function. The teachers need their students to have operating technology so their curriculum can be utilized and so forth. So, but obviously, everything would be analyzed if you needed to go that way. I do want to emphasize that the gen ed funding as a state has not kept up with inflation. And so if a district were to under levy the gen ed revenue, it would be like a double whammy. We're already not adequately funded from the state, and if we under levied, then we would be penalizing our children even to another level, where districts work very hard to keep their budgets balanced. And so they really need all the gen ed revenue that they'd be entitled to be receiving.
I do recall the referendums that we used to have that were for technology, for just operating. And I think my 8 years on the board, or 10 years on the board then, we had at least 2 or 3. Jill, I think you participated in some of them. So.
And if we did not handle the parking lot this year, how would that affect things moving forward?
So I'm assuming you're referencing the Brookside parking lot. So the estimate for the Brookside parking lot is $380,000. And so, you know, half of that is coming in the form of aid and half in levy. But yes, that is the answer to the question. $380,000 is the Brookside parking lot estimate.
So that would be basically the 169 that we're looking at, because they would fund probably 175,000 to make the 350 or whatever.
I have one comment and then a question. I'll start with my question. I don't know if I'm on. I think I am. The debt service fund thing, what if we underlevied that, what would happen?
Actually, you're not allowed. Actually, it's a state mandated thing. The only avenue potentially is if a district wanted to ask for a waiver to keep their fund balance at a higher level for one more year. There's a convoluted, complicated process for that. But basically where we're at right now, we can't touch that one.
I'll take your word on it. And then my comment is, in one sense, like I know we get like quote unquote free money from the state to help in this. So in one sense, it seems like a no-brainer to fund this fully, and it doesn't raise taxes that much. But in the other sense, our community just went out and passed a referendum to help our facilities, you know what I mean? So I kind of want to do right by them, and I don't want to raise taxes, so it's kind of a difficult decision, which it seems so simple, but inside it's not.
So if we roughly didn't do anything with the LTFM, $169,000 of the $459,000, I'm guessing that probably makes a difference of 50 cents on a $100,000 home if we're looking at 272, maybe down to $2 or something. I mean, so 72 cents times 12 is about $12 a year. Because it sounds like the rest of them, I mean, you know, the gen ed, hey, we're getting more students. That's a wonderful thing, and we're adding to our vocational. That's a wonderful thing. And the debt service, it doesn't seem like legally we can touch it. So we really only talk about the LTFM. Just an aside on that one, when was the front part of Brookside's parking lot done within the last 5 years?
Yes, this probably was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
It's been that long. And that just illustrates the difficulty. You know, we only had enough money to do that much of it. And districts across the state were facing the same challenges. And that is the main reason why the legislature enhanced and created this LTFM funding stream, because we're not alone. Other districts are facing the same things where they, replacing a roof is technically more important than upgrading your parking lot. And so many districts, they just didn't have the funds to keep their parking lots up to date and in good repair. And then by delaying it, it actually costs you more to repair down the road if you keep delaying it. So this is the nature of that type of construction.
So let me get this straight, Lori. So if we approve the full LTFM increase tonight, we will not see a significant LTFM increase next year or the next 10 years going forward, because we would be living at the 1.4 million that the state of Minnesota has allocated for elderly area schools.
So you're asking if with passing the 169?
Yes, last year we underlevied. Okay, so this year we're catching up.
Right.
So next year, since we've caught up, what are we going to see for an LTFM increase?
0.
For the next 10 years, because we will have caught up. Right. So that's really where the crux of the issue is for the board is, do we want to catch up, or do we want to come back a year from now and have the same discussion we had last year, and then we'll have this discussion again next year, because we'll still be worried about catching up with the ability for us to max out the LTFM. In the meantime, we're still going to have these facility needs that are going to be kicked down the road a year till we can talk about it again the next year. So that, in my opinion, is the decision where the board is at on this.
So if we catch up, I'm hearing that there's other projects and other things that we need to catch up on and get going and do. But after we catch up on those, will they ever end? That we'll be actually able to like, okay, now, we're
Yeah,
finally caught up, now we can under levy.
So
Will we
it's,
ever come to that
so
point?
it'll be what we'll have, Angie, is 1.4 million for projects for the next 10 years. Okay, this will get us to that level. Okay, will the projects ever end? No, because part of the rationale for the state is the average age of buildings in outside Minnesota is really, really old. And so they have provided this funding mechanism to keep buildings maintained, into perpetuity here. So will the board have the opportunity to under levy if they want to down the road? Yes, they will. But again, you're going to run into, if we do, we will lose a component of state aid that goes along with it. So I hope that answered your question.
Just a couple of observations. I've always been impressed with the extent to which our district succeeds in maintaining our property. And I by virtue of being a coach, I've been to a lot of other districts in this state, and some of them don't do that. And the result is it's not a good situation when your facilities are in a constant state of disrepair. And second observation, in my humble experience, it seems to me that if you don't maintain something, it gets worse, and then it costs more to maintain it eventually. This is, I'm speaking from the experience of a farmer here. You have equipment, machinery, buildings. You need to stay on top of keeping that equipment in good repair, or you're going to be really stuck with a big expense down the road.
Especially in parking lots. My experience at my job is that if you don't continue to keep them in repair, does get expensive down the road.
And I agree that we need to keep things in good repair, but I do believe there could possibly be opportunities to sharpen the pencil along the way. And as Angie had mentioned, the community just did pass the $24.6 million referendum, and there are many in the community still do not understand, and I know that we tried to get the information out as best as possible, but when we said zero tax increase, they're expecting zero tax increase. And there's no way we can do a zero tax increase, but at this point, I am not comfortable with a 5.59 tax increase. Just knowing, even though this might be a piece of the tax pie the taxpayers have, they have a lot of other pieces of tax pies that they're paying. And so it does add up. People are stressed in our current economy, and there are things going on with business in the community that brings extra stress as well. And so I am not comfortable with that percentage at this time.
This is a maximum levy, so it can be looked at if we want at a later date. I think it's December when we finalize it, if I remember correctly.
This is the preliminary levy. We will certify the levy actually in December. And there'll be a truth and taxation hearing prior to the certification of the levy.
Okay, this is an action item. What are your wishes?
Move in favor of the resolution.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Do we know what the current cost of living increase might be for this year?
I don't have that statistic right at my fingertips.
As Lori stated, it was $2.72 a month on a $100,000 home would be the increase for this levy at the max.
And I did crunch the number over here. If we remove the LTFM, that's about $1 per $100,000 house. It should be $12 a year that we'd remove if we did everything else.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further discussion?
Yeah, and in connection with the referendum that we just passed, I think that's a great example, great example of what I would hope could be construed as responsible management, because that project, that facility and all of those expenses were for things that were in desperate need of either adding or replacing or repairing. And it was done at a time when another debt that had been incurred 20 years ago, specifically the new high school, was completed. And so it's a good example of we're never going to be without expenses. You cannot operate without maintenance and repairs. And it's not going to go away. You know, next year there'll be something else. There's always some expense that needs to be incurred in order to keep your facilities in repair. You know, it's similar in every avenue. Our roads in the state of Minnesota, you need to keep them in repair. If you don't, they're going to be undrivable, and you know, taxes are collected in order to make those repairs. And if we think that we're going to exist in a world where we don't have to pay to keep things in repair, you're dreaming.
Okay. I guess my comment would be on the referendum. We did have one ending, and not that I don't like to increase taxes, but I think it was definitely needed also. And I think that the generations before us have provided what we have today, and I think I feel it's my responsibility to provide for generations of the future. Responsibly, of course. Any other comments?
I guess a thought just came to me when the referendum talk is continuing. I would be more inclined to support this maximum levy if we could find that amount to maybe remove from the facilities complex, because I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot in the community that the community doesn't really feel that this is they kind of feel like it's the Cadillac plan that we're going for here. And a lot of people I've spoken with would prefer more of a Chevy plan. So I do feel that there is a lot of room when it comes to that project in sharpening pencils. And if there were to be, you know, if that project were to stay under a certain amount, so that you know, lessens the taxpayer burden, then I would be more apt to be in approval of this percentage, if that makes sense.
Two comments on that, Jill. One, the taxpayers approved the amount when the project went forward. And two, as far as the cost savings, I think we've already saved the taxpayers roughly, help me out here, Lori, $740,000 in interest cost with the method in which we funded the bonds. So I think we're already ahead. Thank you.
Yes, and I am aware that the taxpayers voted for it. That's why I'm bringing it up. But my question then would be, how does the taxpayer see that 700? Do they see it at the end? How do they see that?
Keep in mind that the bonds have been issued. So when the voters passed the referendum vote for the building bonds, the bonds were issued. So, you know, that's already established. It's already issued. And so what comes into play here when you have interest savings on the bond itself, so that actually that actually saves the taxpayers money as we pay for the principal and interest on those bonds. Now, that saved interest is obviously spread over the life of the bond, so the tax savings would be realized over the tax of the bond. It won't be realized in 1 year. Just want to emphasize that the proceeds, the bond proceeds from the sale, that is a finite amount. That was set. So the interest savings, that the taxpayers will benefit from that as the years goes on, as we actually pay the principal and interest installments each year.
So the taxpayers are actually going to get a little bit of a decrease there every year, but we don't know how much exactly, of course.
That's right. It will. They will be seeing that benefit. Yes. Now keep in mind, as I mentioned in the slide, the bonds were issued in 2018. That does not come into our levy cycle until the 2020 pay 21. So that's when that first shows up, if you will. Okay, so it's not reflecting now because that bond issuance, pay 21 is when it comes into play and impacts the taxes. Potentially by that share of the interest. Mm-hmm.
So that might be a good year to do our catch-up process, would be the year when they're seeing that, that kickback from the referendum.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is a roll call vote appropriate? Okay. Neil?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries. Moving on to curriculum and instruction, we have the Halverson's Elementary update. Tanya.
Are we doing the overview first or Halverson first? Yeah, come on. There, Joe. They're going to give you a quick overview before
Okay. Whatever the plan is.
before Tanya talks.
So the Pathways to Success is our guiding document as we look at data across the district. So over the next couple of board meetings, we'll be talking about each of these respective to the district and respective to the buildings that we'll be presenting. Okay, let's see. So reporting is to identify progress towards meeting school board student proficiency and growth goals. You can certainly read that. So we're going to be talking about statewide accountability testing, and for the most part, we'll be talking about the MCA testing. And then a little bit we'll be touching on this new reporting, which we talked about at the board workshop, which is the North Star reporting. And that puts also a little bit of the access testing, which is our EL testing, as well as MTAS testing. And then when the high school presents, we'll be talking about graduation rates.
Okay, like Kathy said, most of our data reporting is MCA, but we thought it's important to give the K2 view as well. So we have K2 results for reading and math. And the way we measure K2 reading and math proficiency is through what we call FAST. And it's actually a national normed assessment created by the University of Minnesota. FAST stands for Formative Assessment System for Teachers. And it's not data that we sent home with parents to say, oh, your child received this. This is more to align with an MTSS model, the multi-tiered system of support of 80% of our kids should be on track with core curriculum, meaning at their grade level. As you can see, the numbers are pretty light there, but I don't know if you can see the numbers on the grid, but it's from 0 to 100%. So these are based in percentages. So as we look at kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, we use this data to determine where are we district-wide, what are our challenges, where do we go, how do we serve students, which students should be in intervention, getting extra support. And the model is typically students below 30% based on their peers should get some type of intervention. Well, you can see when you look at kindergarten, this is the end of the year kindergarten results from last year, that we have some pretty significant needs, that half of our students aren't where the national assessment is for meeting the goals. So what are we doing in response to that? We've done some analysis, we've looked at what are the needs, and we've looked at phonics has been a big deficit. And part of that is, as we look at K readiness, is teacher preparedness. And we're finding that when we talk to our early literacy teachers, they haven't had the training of what a phoneme is, what a grapheme is in college, and that's impacting us in the district. So we have dug pretty deep to say we need to train all our literacy teachers to really understand how to reach all our students. And so this just gives a snapshot. The positive thing in this graph shows that from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, you can see the gap is decreasing, and we are actually growing our students, which is a great thing. But we'd like to see, obviously, stronger results in kindergarten and first grade. So that is the K2 reading data. And then the math is kindergarten, similar to first grade, or similar to the reading results. But first grade, we really talked about what are we missing here that we really need to be doing. And it's number sense is our big gap. And it's making sure teachers understand what best practices are. We have very hardworking teachers in the district, but we need to make sure that we're using all of our resources and the best practices out there and changing practices to better meet the needs of students. So that's the K2 data. Any questions for me on that?
This was last year's results then?
This is a spring, yep. So these second graders would be third graders this year, yep.
There's probably not any data to show as we've come with our pre-K programs and gotten more kids involved to really see that maybe it was 62% before that, now we're down to 50. There's nothing like that out there?
There is. We're still gathering that information from the K teachers. But one thing we did collect is we haven't done a data analysis yet of the K readiness. We'll be doing that this fall. But we actually have less kids who started kindergarten this year that had a preschool experience. So last year we had 94% attend preschool. This year we had 87%. So we have some work in the community to get the message out that early literacy, pre-K services are very important.
So I just noticed that there is the percentiles on the left there I didn't see earlier, so I see.
Yeah, they're hard to read.
Okay, so we're almost to 75 there on the kindergarten. Could you please go back to the reading so I could see that again? Okay.
I should mention this. The trainer we had is a former college professor, and she was fantastic. The teachers were like, I'd say amazed by her, and also surprised at how much they didn't know about early literacy. And her expectation is, and she's worked with a lot of schools around the nation, she said we should be at 100% for kindergarten. Of when children leave kindergarten, they need to have these early literacy skills. And if they don't, we have to figure out why. And so we are bringing her back in November. So teachers are implementing pretty rigorous literacy instruction. And she'll be back in November to work with each building. She'll be here for 4 days in each building. She'll be able to work with principals to help them with supporting them. and working with our coaches and making sure that we're really raising the rigorous levels of literacy instruction in the district.
How many years have you been using FAST?
This is our 5th or 6th year.
So would we be able to get data like showing that for that math, especially that kindergarten moving into that first grade that was performing low?
Yep.
I'm still wondering, was there growth? Maybe it's just, you know, a group of students that struggles and there still was that growth, or maybe
Yeah,
first
absolutely. We
grade
have
is
cohort data since when we started.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to move from kindergarten to high school. So one of the things we talked about at the workshop, and really we've been talking about for a while here in Albert Lea, is that participation rate. So we've been talking about how many of our students opt out of testing or have refusals of testing. The Department of Ed provides us with participation rates. So we can compare across the Big Nine how many of our 10th and 11th graders, in this case at the high school level, are participating or not participating, and you can see that we have the lowest participation rate in the Big Nine for this last spring. So 87 of our, so this is during the accountability window, so those 2 weeks where the Department of Ed compares everybody across the state. And so 87 of our 10th graders opted out or did not test, and 114 of our 11th graders did not test. Now we combine that. In a couple of weeks, you'll see some high school data. So like Red Wing, who also has the next highest opt-out rate or lowest participation rate, we have 8th grade, as do they. And we had 62 of our 8th graders not take the reading test and 53 not take the math test. So overall, the high school is down 149 students who could have taken the test in reading and 167 in math. So this is our district then participation rate. So taking into mind that we had 188 and 218 opt-outs, that's across the district now. So this is 3 through grade 11. And you can see that we had an 87% participation rate in math, reading, and a 89% in math. So across the district, we are about 10 percentage points below the state average. So when we look at our proficiency, we are without those 218 students and those 188 students count against us. So they give us a 0 in the denominator.
So why do you think they opt out? Do you have a feel for that?
Why don't we ask the two students that are
Let's
here?
ask Gigi, since she's
I'd love to hear what you have to
seasoned.
say about that.
Our more seasoned board member.
So the question is why we opt out. I think the biggest thing is that when you're taking all your classes and you're trying to keep up with everything, and the teachers have really high expectations of you, which is good because, you know, getting stuff learned. But just taking out of that class to go sit in a room and do stuff you're probably not even working on if you're in a different, like if you're in a higher level math and they're asking you questions that are things you worked on a year or two ago, that's things that distracts you just from whatever you're doing in class. And from a student point of view, doesn't make sense to go sit in a room and either get stressed about a test or just have to sit and answer all those questions when you know you have other stuff to do. And then from the teachers, I know a lot of them just seem to get annoyed from having to work around the MCA schedule, especially when they'll do review for you, which is nice. But then while they do that review, that also takes out of those teaching days. And while we have all the other types of testing, like AP and everything at the end of the year, that gets teaching days, like actual academic days in the classroom, down to a really low level than normal.
Yeah, like I think last year in math, I spent like 2.5 weeks reviewing for the MCA, and then we were cutting it very close at the end of the school year. We had a test on the last day of school, and it wasn't even our final. Like, we are so limited on our days of school, and we spend a lot of time reviewing for these tests, and it's not even stuff that we've done that year. So I think that's a big reason. It's just frustrating that way. But the more people that opt out, the worse we look as a school district. So that isn't great, but I understand why people do opt out.
And the other thing is that we don't see any type of direct benefit. Like as students, I know there's stuff that school gets, but as students, you don't. All you know is you go sit there and answer question after question, like 60, 100, however many they want you to answer, for 2-3 hours. And it's just not fun.
So you've already taken your ACT, and you already know that you're probably going to go someplace, so that test means nothing to you. Is that fair?
MCAs, I mean, in school they'll tell you that, like, it helps to get into higher level classes, like that decision type of thing and placing for courses. But other than that, it's no use for, like, applications or things like that.
We had a committee from the legislature here probably 3 years ago now in this very room, and we discussed this very issue, and there's a couple of things that go along with it. You just heard from the student's perspective of, I'm given the ACT, or we're taking the ACT, what do these other tests mean to us? From the teacher angle, it's really it's a standards-driven discussion, okay? And so the state says, here are the standards we want you to teach. We're going to assess them this way using the MCA. But our students, and really to a large degree at the high school, our teachers find minimal value in the MCA results. So a suggestion that was provided to the committee when they visited our district was, why don't we go to an ACT test? And you can use that as your test that you use to validate how well your school is doing. Kids are taking it. They're interested in taking it. If not, they can take Word Keys or another type of vocational test within the ACT suite of tests. But we are, and so I would encourage, as we get into the state session here in January, when the legislature gets back in session, this is a key issue for at least this board and this district to talk to our legislators about. Really look what's happening here in Albert Lea, and this is, and you saw, Ken, you sent me that article from Red Wing, and so it is starting to become more of an issue statewide, and we are just at the, unfortunately in this case, the leading edge of it.
I think that article had the rate much lower that we're taking the test than what that number shows. If I remember the article correctly, it was in the MSBA thing that comes every day, and it was in like last Friday.
Okay, so keep in mind an average of 200 opt-outs across the district. And so this is our proficiency as a district in reading and math, or math and reading, excuse me. If you add 200 students, or even 100 students to that number proficient, say half of the students who opted out were proficient in reading and math, we would pretty closely approximate the state average. Not quite, but would be within 2 to 3 percentage points. And we know our 11th graders, many of them are students who do well in school and choose not to take the test. So yes, our proficiency rating in math is 10, both of them are about 10 percentage points below, but that's without 200 students. And those 200 students are in the denominator, so they are part of this formula. And lastly, this is our growth. So again, the 200 and so students who did not participate, they're not included in here. So we don't know if they would have grown from their previous MCA to this MCA. So our growth rate, our goal as a district is 90%, and we're at about 60%. A little higher in reading than we are in math.
So you're saying the ones that opt out do not affect this here, so we could focus more on this and not those that are taking.
They're not figured into the formula, but we don't know if they grew or they didn't because we don't have that test score.
And from talking with some of the professionals at the high school, a lot of the kids who opt out are college-bound students who are taking a lot of other things, and this test is not important to them. And so if they are bound for college, they are probably more likely to have some medium to high level growth than some of the other students.
So that's district-wide data. We wanted to just kind of do a general overview of some of the, this discussion around North Star rating, and this is part of the North Star rating, as well as trying to take those pieces that are goals of ours. So I'm going to turn it over if there aren't further questions. Tanya.
Yeah, this, being a math type and somewhat familiar with statistics, one of the most important things if you're going to do any kind of a survey is you're very careful about the selection of those that are surveyed. And it appears to me that we have a pretty serious problem here in coming up with data that's useful at all. And I sympathize with you folks who have to struggle to make some sense out of all this, because it's the student population that from which we are collecting data has got to be pretty seriously skewed.
But we really don't have data of how many and how many of the college-bound compared to the other. It's just we're hearing a lot. So do we have the data?
We could probably do because we know who the opt-outs are, and so we could do some analysis there and get that to you in an update.
Thank you.
Yep. So Tanya is going to talk to the board now about Halverson, and just a couple things before Tanya starts. Tanya took over midway last year through Halverson, and she walked into a very challenging situation, and you're going to see some challenging data that she's going to show you tonight. On the flip side, though, Tanya has gone to Halverson, and because of her presence there are a number of teachers in this district who want to work with Tanya there. And so we have, particularly in grades 4 and 5, some pretty great teachers who have now transferred to Halverson for this year. But having said that, you're going to see some pretty bad data here through some of these slides, and Tanya's going to briefly talk through it and then discuss her way forward here. So, Tanya.
Again, Tanya Franks, principal at Halverson Elementary. Thank you for having me today, school board and Dr. Funk and Lori. For those of you that attended the district-wide kickoff, what we affectionately call the hug-in, you listened to a very great speech from Kristen Seeger, and throughout that speech, one thing she kept coming to is being comfortable, being uncomfortable. You heard her say it over and over again. That's how I feel this fall, is I'm getting very comfortable being uncomfortable. Because as you'll see, as Dr. Funk already referenced, our data is super uncomfortable. It's really hard. It's really hard to sit here and show you what I have to show you today, but also exciting because we can talk about what next. So we'll go through what our data says and then kind of update you on what our building level plans are moving forward. So, if I push the right ones. This is our K2 reading data at Halverson. I'm not going to, Mary Jo said a few of the things already that I had in my notes as well. As you can see, our kindergarten, first and second grade data there. In all grade levels, kindergarten through second grade, more than 50% of our students are below those grade level expectations in reading. As Mary Jo already stated, pieces that are extremely important in improving this for the future are those early literacy skills. It is imperative that we have those early literacy skills in kindergarten and first grade so that we don't continue to create that educational achievement gap for our second, third, fourth, and fifth graders. By the time they're in fifth grade, we have to pass those kids on to Southwest. And as we get to the MCA slides later, you'll see how uncomfortable that is for the kids that we sent on to Southwest. So that early literacy piece is extremely important for us to get into our classrooms. Another piece of that too is myself being in that position of an instructional leader in the building. It's really important for me to be in classrooms and working with teachers. We've created collaborative grade level team meetings this year, so our instructional coach, Dawn Ware, and myself are meeting with our grade level teams every week. And so I think that's going to be a big boost in talking about our data regularly. What are our plans? What are our goals? And I think that'll help create some of the focus maybe that they need in the primary grades. This is our K2 math data. Again, very similar bars to what you saw on the reading data. Again, more than 50% of Halverson's students are below the grade level expectations in math. Second grade looks slightly better, but still concerning. There's a lot there. So it is good to see, as Mary Jo and Kathy already pointed out as well, our green proficiency rate is increasing by the time we get to second grade. But I reflect on how much work those second grade teachers had to put in to get those kids there because that gap was so large. So how do we help improve that as we move forward? As they stated also, we have lots of really hard-working teachers. The question is, are we doing the right work while we're doing that hard work? We have to work smarter in how are we reaching our student needs. Part of that is looking at where are our deficits and analyzing that data so that we can meet our student needs. The next actually four slides are going to be grade level specific. So we'll be looking at reading in math in third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and then the fourth slide will be our overall building. So this one is our third grade proficiency in reading and math. As you know, our board goal is 80% proficiency. Unfortunately, you see that our trend line is declining in both reading and math. This is our fourth grade slide for reading and math. Again, that trend line isn't necessarily declining. You can see in math there was a little spike last year, but then, or in 2017, but last year went down again. One thing that we did mid-year, actually when I came on to Halverson's team in January, we added a fourth grade teacher. Part of that was to help lower our class sizes and improve instructional practices. Didn't necessarily see the results we wanted in the math area, just a slight dip there in the reading piece. Fifth grade proficiency in reading and math. Again, you can see a significant decline in our trend line. That fifth grade math piece, 15% of our students proficient in math. I think this and the one you won't see today is science. Those two slides are the ones that make me the most uncomfortable. To say we're sending 15% of our students proficient in math onto Southwest, when I think about the gap that has created for our student achievement down the road. So I think, and I'm going to refer to my notes because I made a whole long list. I think obviously that's uncomfortable, it's concerning, but things that we're talking about in our professional learning communities and our building instructional leadership teams are that recommitment to our standards. Yes, our standards are our curriculum, and we have a curricular resource, but making sure that we're hitting the standards at all times in our instructional practices. Another thing that I noticed last year at Halverson is a resource that we have at our fingertips is number talks. And one of the things I noticed as I was observing in classrooms is the consistency with which number talks were or were not being delivered. And so I think a recommitment to what does that look like in our classrooms will help improve what this looks like for the future. And then also that we have to start that at the primary level. If we don't start that commitment at the primary level, that gap continues to widen, and as the students get older, those intermediate teachers have a lot of catching up to do. So we're only helping our colleagues out to be committed to those things that we say are non-negotiables. Reading, the same thing, focusing on guided reading. Teachers are using those reading powers to make sure that they're meeting student needs. Mary Jo also mentioned our decoding training and helping students with decoding and fluency that has impacted their academic progress in reading. Oh, no, I went too far. This is across our whole building. Proficiency of all students in reading and math across all of Halverson. For this one, again, thinking back to our Pathways to Success document that the board has set as our goals of 80% proficiency, we've been working as a building instructional leadership team to talk about what does our plan look like moving forward. Oftentimes, we've set our goal for that PLC process to be a really safe goal, and we talked about kind of that reaching for the stars goal and making it bigger than what it's been before. And so our building determined that for this school year, they wanted to set a 20% growth in both reading and math. That's their goal for this year. But then we talked about a longer range plan, because as you know, as you're doing goal planning, you just don't do year to year, okay? You guys already talked about it with the long-term facilities, right? You're not thinking about that just 1 year in advance. You're thinking about that down the road and how that impacts year after year after year. That's the same with our student growth. How is that impacting our students year after year? So we talked about, okay, the board goal is 80% proficiency. When and how can we get our students there? And so we set up a 3-year plan to do that. And so setting that goal high of 20% this first year, but then the next 2 consecutive years, if they can get 13% each year, imagine what that would be like if I could sit in this seat 3 years down the road and say we're there. So our building instructional leadership team is working on that. Growth targets. This is similar to the one that Kathy and Mary Jo shared also. With the growth targets, the expectations are set based on the average improvements from year to year on the statewide MCA assessments. So students are considered on track if the students who are proficient made medium to high growth, or non-proficient students that made high growth. So if you look at our reading slide on the left, reading shows that 55.6% of our students made medium to high growth, and 47.7% of our students made medium to high growth in math. So while it's not the 90% goal, I think it's encouraging to see that those numbers are close to or above 50%, especially when I look at the devastating numbers on the other slides. The college and career readiness consistent attendance in the elementary, you can see that this one shows statewide, the Albert Lee Public School District, and then Halverson Elementary. So for Halverson Elementary, our consistent attendance was 89% attendance. With the attendance piece, a few pieces that we have in place to help improve that attendance is regular weekly attendance meetings with myself, the school social worker, and our school counselor. We're pretty dedicated to weekly letters being mailed out to our families that have been absent for 3, 5, and 7 days. Teachers are contacting the parents each time a letter goes out. We're writing contracts for students that have 5 days of attendance, absences or more. I think that piece is really important because it's helping us connect with families to problem solve. It's not a message of your student's been absent. It's not that disciplinary action, it's how can we work together to get your student here more regularly? And so I think that piece is really important when we're looking at that attendance contract.
Tanya, are those just all elementary, or is it across all the way through high school? Do you know? the district? and
For the
statewide?
attendance. It's the entire district for statewide Albert Lea Public Schools, so our whole district, and then just Halverson for the one bar. So moving forward, I recall my first assignment from Dr. Funk when I moved to Halverson in January of 2018 was observe. Tanya, that's your job. Get in there, observe. Watch what's happening, what's going on in classrooms, observe and learn. And so for the first 5 months, that's what I did. I went in and observed. I promised the staff at that time that we'd make minor changes to pieces that I felt needed immediate attention, but I wasn't going to come in and implode anything, and I didn't. One thing, the climate of the building surrounding student behavior, office referrals, impact on student learning was an issue that I felt comfortable addressing immediately, and so that's one of the things that I did right away. Halverson staff took time to review our building-wide behavior expectations and get everyone on the same page. Another piece that we did was recommitted to the responsive classroom piece. There had been some I don't know the right word, differing opinions about what direction the building was going in terms of responsive classroom versus positive behavior intervention systems, PBIS approaches. And what we really needed to do was recommit to that responsive classroom piece and decide on a building-wide set of expectations that all teachers could commit to as a non-negotiable, and I could commit to following through with from my piece as well. One of the great pieces of that is we were able to have a responsive classroom consultant come in and spend a day in our building, and we really received excellent feedback from her. And that wasn't only from a behavior standpoint, it was from an academic standpoint as well. So with that, we were able to also get a tool that will help us look throughout the rest of this year on, are we engaging in effective classroom management in our building? Are we employing engaging academics in our classrooms? Do we have a positive community with our student body? And then developmentally responsive teaching. Fast forward to now, am I still observing? Every single day. But it's so much more than that. We have teacher leaders at Halverson that are there to really dig in and do the right work. Manageable class sizes. I'm excited that our intervention teachers this year, we have 2 of them. They are pushing into every grade level for reading, K-5. We had lots of gaps in that instructional practice last year. This year, both of them are going into every grade level. Our success coaches are being pushed in on a consistent schedule for reading, as well as our educational assistant. The other piece is, we're excited as we move forward with our facilities upgrade. That's a result of the referendum passing, and we appreciate the support of the community and the board for doing that, because we look at the opportunities that provides for our student body in the future. And so I know there's a lot of excitement surrounding that at Halverson. So we talk a lot about hopes and dreams with our students all the time. I guess my greatest hope is that when I sit here next fall, that all looks different. I want it to be a picture of high-impact teaching that results in student learning and a level of academic achievement greater than what you saw here today. I don't expect any miracles. I don't. But I do expect change. And I think Halverson's ready to be that change. Thank you. Any questions?
Tanya, is there any way that the community can help? For example, retired people or parents that don't work during the day, that they could come in and maybe read with kids? Is there a way that we can help?
Absolutely. So I believe it's in the district office, there is a volunteer form, and if a member of the community or a parents generally have contacted the child's teacher and made arrangements, they can sign into the office. We're working really hard on that safe community as well, and making sure that our volunteers are signing into the office and following those proper steps. But there is also a volunteer form at the district office if it was somebody other than a parent, a community member. wanted to come in and volunteer, read with students. It could be during win time, which is called What I Need time. That might be a time where students sometimes are doing a read to self time. That would be a great opportunity for them to read with an adult mentor. Good question.
Well, you did a very nice job talking about uncomfortable stuff, like you said.
Thank you, Angie.
And I think that, you know, the teacher's 20% goal is wonderful. Looks like you guys have a lot of stuff in place. I know, we all know that MCAs and other testing are just a snapshot of a day, and the kids have to be ready to learn and have things in the home environment too. But it looks like you guys are going to do everything you can at Howerson. I'm excited to hear from you next year.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you've got a great plan going. It's a lot of hard work, I'm sure, and so I want to thank you and your staff for that hard work, because we do need to improve those numbers, so
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
And 2/3 of battle is energy, and you've got it, girl.
I try. I try. All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Nick?
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited to share Lakeview's data that will encapsulate our work throughout last year and help share a little bit about our process and our plan for moving forward this year. And so this year, Lakeview is at the smallest that I can ever remember. We're 344 students, and so we've been seeing fewer and fewer kids. Last year it was about 360, so we'll be thinking of that when we start looking through these numbers here as well, building-wide. 360 last year, K-5. Here is our spring data for our K-2 reading. You can see that it very much mimics what Mary Jo had shared with the changes from kindergarten through second grade. Most particularly the number of students who are at that above 85% or in that 31 to 85% window. It's very similar to what we saw at the district level and even with what Tanya had shared too. And so we certainly see this as an opportunity for us to really identify what areas we need to focus on a little bit more, what areas we need to change. Many things that Tanya had spoke to and Mary Jo had shared really come up with this conversation too, in particular the phonics, and just really buckling down with how we're introducing that with our students and helping them to attain what they need to attain. Certainly second grade is a success, as that would show pretty close to, I think, 75% in the blue or green, which is really nice for us to see. And yet at the same time, we know that there's still work left to do. Again, first grade and kindergarten in particular here with our reading areas of concern for us. As I share this too, I just want to share that just last week, late Thursday and Friday, Nicole Brownlee and myself, our instructional coach, spent a good amount of time chatting with teachers at individual grade levels to talk about some of the data that we're sharing here today as well. And so we had some really robust conversations around what are things that they're noticing, what are areas that they wonder a little bit more about, and then what is our plan moving forward as we look at this as well. What support might they need from me? What support might they need from each other? What support might they need from our instructional coach? And it really led into some really good conversations about where we're at with each grade level, kindergarten through fifth grade. When we look at our math data here, again, we can see some things that we can feel very good about. Second grade math in particular is one that we can be very happy about with what we're seeing there. And then in math for kindergarten and first grade, it's right around the 50% mark is where that turns out to be for both of those grade levels. Might be 52, 51%, somewhere around there. So we certainly see a significant number of our students at Lakeview who we need to really spend some time with and identify what our challenges are and how we can go about meeting their needs as well in terms of math. And so part of the conversation we had as a building too at each of these grade levels did revolve around the trend data. I can't remember who asked about that earlier, but it was showing just where have our classrooms been over the past 3 years in relation, and we're seeing a trend in both kindergarten and first grade in math and reading where we're seeing some declines there, and it's alarming, and it certainly has created a sense of urgency for us too as to what strategies do we need to employ and how do we need to meet the needs of our students. at our building and across Albert Lee. They're coming to us more and more diverse with more and more needs each and every year. And so we have to know that we can't stand pat with what we've always done, because that's not always going to be the best way to meet the needs of our students. And so we're really looking forward to exploring some of those opportunities together and finding ways to best meet their needs. As we transition from the FAST data to our MCA data next, this would be our third grade reading and math data in terms of what it looks like compared to years before. You can see, though, here too, we are still seeing a decline from year to year to year. Our decline that we're seeing from math still, from 81 2 years ago to 70% last year, and for reading, 67.9 to 56.1. And so we've had, the conversations that we've had at third, fourth, and fifth around data in particular. Finally, September 17th or so, we received the benchmark reports from the state of Minnesota, and those are reports that help us really look at standards and benchmarks that we're seeing some success with, and standards and benchmarks that maybe we see some improvement with. And so third, fourth, and fifth grade, our conversations really went around those benchmark reports, and it's some really strong conversations about, all right, what are we seeing for things that we might be missing that we haven't? We're seeing things like figurative language. We're seeing like how do we interact with our text and be able to work through that as areas for us to really focus on and to build our skills with. And so it was really fun for us to have those conversations and really get to that point of here's what we want to do next at each grade level, and there was a lot of similarities between each one there too. As we look through these two, we're still, if we were to compare these to the state line, we're still showing some significant progress above the state line. But anytime we see that gradual downward trend, that certainly creates opportunities for us to say, all right, something's not quite clicking the way we had hoped it to click. Doesn't mean we're not doing the right work like has been mentioned either. It just means how do we sharpen that saw and make sure that we're getting at the meat of what it is we want to do. So when we look into our math and our fourth grade math and our fourth grade reading, on the left-hand side there is our reading, and you can see that after a pretty strong 2017, we had another dip in 2018 down to about 58%. For our fourth graders, math is certainly a highlight for us at fourth grade. You can see that we've continued to trend up there, 84% this year, and so certainly a lot that we can talk about to help us identify what did we do here to really see that growth continue to go instead of having the downward trend, look at the upward trend. And then our fifth grade, we can see here, it's a little bit more of a steady line from year to year to year. Might decrease a little bit, increase a little bit, but whether it's around 70% for reading or about 73 to 70% in math, it's been a little bit more of a flat line there for us. And so we're looking at what are areas that we can really spend some time with and combing that out and saying, all right, third grade, we've seen these things be very important for us as far as what we want to do. Fourth grade here, how can we build upon that in fifth grade and help our students continue to grow? And then finally, it brings us to our building data. Again, you can see our math remain relatively flat from year to year. And we think about that 80% math goal or 80% proficiency goal of the district. For math, we push really close to that. Each year we get a little bit closer. This year fell back a little bit, but it's still certainly within striking range for us. Reading, we've done a little bit more of the up and down with. And last year we saw certainly more of the down than what we've had in the past, going from 69% down to 61%. And so when we look at where our building is at as a whole, given these grades, some of the work that we've also done is start looking at subgroups within this, within each subject area. And obviously we can see that there's some really positive trends going on for our math. And when we see most of our subgroups scoring well above the state averages, it's continuing to grow, whether it be our free and reduced lunch kids, whether it be our EL students, whether it be our special education students, that we see some successes in math that we're looking to try to build off of in reading and say, how can we pull some of that, some of the strategies we're using, some of the mindsets that are out there for us to start tapping into for reading because in all honesty, when we pull that same subgroup data for reading, we see that we're right about at the same as the state, and we've been decreasing each and every year to this year, where some of our subgroups a little below, some of our groups right at about, and some of our groups quite a bit above. But it's certainly something that we're looking at and saying, what have we done in math that we can grab onto and build upon it within reading to help us move that. Getting back to the standards is certainly one of those, really kind of focusing in on that area. Some of it too is how do we help our students to process what they're reading in a way that is effective? And I don't know if we've really done that enough in the past few years. Conversations we've had, 4th and 5th grade especially, has been we do a lot of collaborative conversations. And so when they get put in a situation where it's them and a test, are they cueing into the things that they've talked about collectively to say, okay, this is how I maybe synthesize this is how I comprehend this, and this is how I move through it. So those are a few things that we're looking at in particular to capture. Obviously, phonics is another one of those areas, but as far as how do we engage our students, are we engaging them with the right work? Are we engaging them with a rigorous work that we know is going to help them grow and help them learn? Some fine-tuning of the strategies we're currently implementing within our school and within our classrooms are really standing out as some of the areas of what we're going to focus on. Turn-in talks within students. What do our learning targets say? Do they really boil down to what we want them to do, what we want our students to learn, and are we connecting our learning to that? When we hear student voice, is it really strong conversation with each other, or is it still maybe surface level in some areas? So we're looking to how do we boil this down, how do we funnel this down so that it really works for us at its greatest impact? So that's where we're kind of at right now with math and reading in particular, and just the overall, I guess, direction of our building. Growth targets are right up here, and you can kind of see where we're at with our different growth targets. And Tanya shared a little bit about what that looks like, and we certainly didn't hit the 90% goal. Last year, we were a little bit closer to it than what we had been this year. But yet, we still have a lot that we can be happy about and that we can grow from in that area. One data point that I'd like to share to our 5th graders, and I'd like to share with you guys too, our 5th grade staff, 3, 4, 5, very helpful too. I collect data from year to year to year relative to the MCAs. And when I looked at our 5th graders leaving last year, what we found was as 3rd graders, that same group of 3rd graders, when they were in 3rd grade, we had 11 score in the does not meet. And as 5th graders, of those who stayed with us, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, we were down to 1 student who was in that does not meet section. And that student grew significantly from year to year. But it was always nice for us to have that conversation and say, look at this consistency in the work that we do, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. Look at what we've done with those students. Now, do we still see students move in? Yes, we do. Do we, 4th grade, 5th grade that are in maybe the red? Yes, absolutely. But to be able to put a feather in our cap and say, look at what we've been able to do with our reading scores for these students. The trend was similar to that the year before. Math was a little bit different, but yet we were scoring really high in math, so we might have been able to see some of that coming. But it was just a neat conversation for us to have as a 5th grade, 4th grade, and 3rd grade group of look at some of the cool things we do, because we get really serious about reading and we see our scores, and I said the urgency is there, and it's hard for us not to feel really bad about what that number looks like and what are we doing wrong and what's not happening, that we can sometimes forget about, well, what is happening and what areas of success can we find and build upon, and I think that's certainly one of those areas. And then finally, we have our attendance report here, and Lakeview clocks in at about 91% for consistent attendance throughout the year. So that's where we fit, and that's where we stand relative to the other data points. So with that, questions or comments from the group?
Yeah, I really like your comments about growth. It's somewhat misleading, I would assume, to present a graph or to view a graph that describes the performance of 5th graders in 2016, 2017, 2018. That, to me, the first thing I think of, that's probably a function of where they were when they entered kindergarten. Yeah. But when you take a group of students, the same group of students, and measure where they are in 1st grade as opposed to where they are in 2nd grade and 3rd grade and 4th grade, that to me would be a pretty profound indicator of how well you're doing.
Absolutely. And we could go back and look at some of the slides that we had there too with proficiency and view our 2016 group or our 2015 group as they went through, and you can see that there are opportunities for improvement. We had a third grade group, I think, at 1 percentage point, and then in fourth grade they were up real high, and then fifth grade back down again, or third grade really high, and then fourth grade maybe dip back down. And so that leads into conversations about, all right, what might have been missing with this, or what might have been happening here, and helps us work through that problem-solving process.
I have a question regarding the number of students that opt out. Are there any in grade school?
Very small. At our building at Lakeview in particular, I think our number stood at about 6 or 7. Most of the students that were within that category, though, are some of our special education students who parents have found putting them in that setting is just way too stressful for them, and they're just asking them not to go through that on a daily basis. So at our building in particular, it's really small, and it's mainly special education students.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Nick. Appreciate your efforts also, and it's good to see the passion to get our students higher and better educated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Our next item of business is our energy report. Mr. Lund, it's been a long time since I've seen you.
Well, on a little lighter note now, we can, we do work to save taxpayers' money, and we're always concerned about that. And if you go back and look, our district was concerned about that. No one ever says my voice isn't strong enough. But if you go back and look at our history, we've been in this program almost 15 years now. And over that 15 years, we've been able to save the district about $4 million, a little over $4 million. And our total energy cost for the school year was about $678,000, just slightly over that. But more important, if you look at the next, the numbers are small, but what I want to focus on is where we were in 2002 and 2003. Before we started this program, we were spending about $665,000 for our energy costs. And 15 years later, almost 15 years later, we've spent $678,000. So that's not a significant increase when you consider what we've done in our district over that period of time. And a lot of that is due to the energy program, but other changes that you've made in our lighting, in our heating systems, and so forth. But you also have to remember, we air conditioned all of our buildings, and with that increase in costs, that's pretty minimal.
Do those costs consider inflation?
No. Nope, I don't consider inflation. I don't consider what we've done.
It'd be a lot better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's just raw data. Yeah. It's so if you looked at all of those factors, and you can see in the far right column what our actual energy savings were over that period of time. And we're right in about, this past year, we're right at about where we've been with $282,501. So, we're maintaining. Sometimes I get a little anxious and want us to up that number a little bit, but you can see here exactly with our electricity.
I just want to make one comment on this slide. If you look at the peak, you had it underlined there, but it was $737,000.
Right.
So that is amazing.
But those were the years when natural gas went up. You remember those years when it skyrocketed, and we got caught in that also, in some of that. So, but if you look at where we were as far as in 2003, our base year, the kilowatt hours that we use and how we reduce that, almost 2 million kilowatt hours, and significantly reduced our demand, which is interesting because that's not something you generally do when you add air conditioning. You generally have more demand. And that's a key factor because that determines your rate. So as your demand goes up, your rate goes up. And we pay significantly higher in the summer months than we do in the winter months. And you can see also, I think it's important to look at what we're paying per kilowatt hour in 2002, 6.9 cents. And now we've not quite doubled it, but maybe 40% increase there. So in spite of changes there, we've been able to maintain that cost. Moving on to, and this is sort of a graph that, excuse me, indicates, the first is a normalized use of electricity, which means we factored in weather. So you can see even this past year, we were down just slightly from the previous year. You may think this last year was a mild winter, and it was in the number of 0-degree days we had, but we had a significantly higher number of days where we were using heating. Because you remember, we ran heating almost till the last day of school this past spring. Not severe weather, but, and there you can see the cost. Even though on the right side, our usage is pretty flat, but our cost has increased over that period of time. Now, if you look at our natural gas, you can see how we reduced the number of therms we've used there, but and the cost hasn't gone up quite as much there as it has with electricity, although we're going to have an increase in that in the coming year. And we've been able to also reduce that about 41.9%. And there you can see with the normalized on the right, on the left, use and the cost. Our use is flat, our cost is rising. So, water and sewer, this is one that's really difficult to control because our community it's really going up, and I'm sure it's going to continue to go up significantly. Even though, again, we've reduced our usage significantly there, you can see what our cost is done over that period of time. It's really gone up, and so that's a big cost. A big factor in that is we're pretty flat there, but a lot of it will depend on our summer rain, because when we start irrigating out at the Hammer Field, that runs the cost pretty quickly. So, and there again, you can see our use declines. Our cost has been fairly flat over the last few years. And then I've given you a comparison with the buildings, and I like to do, I also participate with what they call the B3. We put our data into the state, so the state can say how your buildings rank with other buildings within our state of the same use and the same age. So you look at it, and out of 100, Brookside is like in the 65th percentile, and Halverson is down, probably our lowest building, and that's due to the fact it's a one-level building. It's maybe putting a new roof on it this year will help that a little bit. Doesn't have thermal pane windows in it and things like that. So Halverson's pretty low, and then you can also look at Sibley is very high, and as you recall, Sibley does not heat their own building, so they look real good. If you don't, Southwest remarkably looks pretty good considering the fact they're heating two buildings there, and we can't designate that on that. And then I also went to Energy Star, which is a national rating, and shows how you would rate out of 100. If you're above the 75th percentile, then you would qualify as an Energy Star building. We just don't do the paperwork anymore because it's a lot of work. And then also on the far right, you can see what we spend per square foot. So you can compare buildings. Lakeview is pretty high on that one, Halverson. So it's kind of gives you a comparison so that you can see how we're doing.
Steve, is that, here at Brookside, I see it's, the cost there, is there a shared cost on that, or? So it's picking up that 67 cents, that's a national
That would be.
per square foot?
No, that's what we're paying, that's what we're using for utilities within. Right. Yeah, and the national average is $1.25, and that's a few years old. I can't quite find anything that's more recent than maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So, but it gives you some indication of where we're at. We're doing quite well, and I think that's important. I think it's important that our taxpayers know that we are doing things and we are concerned about the cost of education, and this is one way we can impact it without really sacrificing anything for our students. Basically, it's at no cost.
Steve, you mentioned that changing the lighting and doing things like that in buildings has saved a lot of money. So you get around to all our buildings. How do you feel like, I mean, we're just talking about our levy tonight and the dollars. Do you have any type of thoughts on what we've done with the lights and the other things that where we've used these dollars to improve things?
Oh, yes. They've paid for themselves, several times. The lighting, I think, was a payback in about 2.5 years, and I think, 7, 8 years now that you've done that. So you're making money on that every year. But of course, lighting is one of these things. This is changing so fast. I'm just amazed every month when I read the professional journals that I get where lighting is going. I mean, it's wild, but it's something you just don't want to keep up with because there's something better next week, and so that's and also you can see that our places that we put in more efficient furnaces, boilers have really decreased our cost. Southwest still has the older boiler. It was updated, but it's still the old boiler and things like that. So, some of those haven't seen quite the reduction that, for example, Brookside, you can see how well they do. For the size of the building, they do very, very well with the new boilers and small package boilers that we have. So, and here it gives you some idea if you're interested in the environmental impact. You can see the number of trees and that we would have grown over a 10-year period of time to get you the same results, or the number of passenger cars that you've taken off the highway to achieve the same results. So it's just kind of an interesting. But I think the board should always feel good about what you've done there and where you've been, and hopefully we can continue the same practice and continue. I think it's important that we get that message out to the taxpayers. Yeah, we're doing a lot, We don't always stand up and shout about it, but it's there and we're doing it. And, if you added that $4 million onto what we've spent, it's made quite a change. So, any other questions?
I remember when we started this project, it was all very much a learning experience for us, but for me, it's really interesting to see what it's done over the years since you have started. And that
Right.
$4 million is amazing.
Right. And they came in and they guaranteed this number, and I'd been through a lot of these programs, and I was a little bit leery of it, and I said, well, if it isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, I won't be here long. But it's doing, I'm still here after 15 years, so.
Well, it's because someone's watching over it, Steve.
Well,
Thank you.
that's part of it, but the big part is it's teacher-driven program. I can't do it, you know, I only make suggestions. You can do what you want to or don't want to. And, you know, it takes support of administrators, it takes support, because they don't really care what I think, and be honest with you. You know, he was a former administrator. After hearing the reports today, I'm happy to be a former administrator. But,
So are those numbers shared with each school?
yes, I send a monthly report to the administrators, and to the custodians. I sent a different report to the staff, so everyone gets a report, depending on how much I feel they want to know or read. Or teachers get a very abbreviated report because they just want a quick picture. Yep. Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steve, I think when you started this program a few years back, I dubbed you the Prince of Darkness.
Okay, our last item of business is review of the suspension data. Dr. Funk.
Yes, thank you. One of the board members asked a few weeks ago, I think, some information about suspension data in the district. So Kathy has delved through a number of reports through the Department of Education, and I'm here to share some of this. Go ahead and hit the slide, Ashley. So this is, let's see here, last year data, Kathy, correct? Yep. So that shows you total number of in-school and out-of-school suspensions that we had from this past school year. And it's broken down between all students, which you can see 369 in school, 650 out. And of those free and reduced, how many of them were free and reduced? 217, 476. So
Are those instances or like days? If someone was suspended for 2 days, is it counted twice up there, or?
The number of instances, whether it be 1 hour of an in-school suspension or 2 days.
Okay,
Each one is an instance.
thank you.
So here is the breakdown of number of out-of-school suspensions, and the federal and state government are very interested in demographic breakdown of what type of student received a suspension. And so from left to right along the bottom there, you can see we have the demographic makeup of our district. Hispanic students make up 21.5% of our district. Black students make up 3.1%, white students 65.8%, Asian Pacific Islander students 6.2%, and American Indian Alaskan 0.2%. So those are the percentages of students that we have in each of those subgroups in the district. What you see in the red and blue there are the percent of that, percent of students who make up the suspensions from each group. So for example, for Hispanic there, you see 36.15 and then 2.15, which give you 38.3. So of our Hispanic students who make up 21.5% of the district, they had 38.3 of the suspensions for the last school year. Okay? Our black students who make up roughly 7.5%, or 3% of our district, had about 7.5% of our suspensions last year. Our white students who make up 65% of the district had about 55% or 53%, 54% of the suspensions last year. So when the feds come in and look at the data and they look at whether or not you are suspending on an equitable manner between what your student demographic is and the number of kids who are suspended, that's the number they look at, the delta between percent of your student population and the number of kids who were, the percentage of the kids from that population who were suspended. What they don't look at, and this is what I alluded to at the work session we had a few weeks ago, they don't look at poverty. They don't look at all that, they don't care about free and reduced rate. They do in every other testing report we give, but they don't when it comes to suspensions. So I had Kathy run the numbers for me, and it's just interesting that of our Hispanic group of students who are suspended, 36% of the kids who are Hispanic who are suspended come from free and reduced backgrounds. 2% don't. Okay, so of the Hispanic group of kids who have been suspended, if you are not free and reduced and Hispanic, likely you're not going to have been suspended in our school district. Only 2% of that group does. Same thing for our black population. We have more black students of poverty who are suspended than black students not of poverty. We have more white students of poverty suspended than white students not of poverty. So I want to draw this to the board's attention because when we read about these things in the news and we hear about them, poverty is never discussed. But poverty is a significant factor, as well as the demographics of who's being suspended. But poverty is also something we got to take a look at. Very similar numbers for, go ahead Ashley, move a slide, for in-school suspension. You can see again the very similar results from the students who have been suspended. So there are multiple factors involved, and to say that poverty is not an issue that we're looking at is disingenuous, and so that's why I'm bringing it to the board's attention. Questions or comments on that?
Do you have any breakout by grades? Do certain groups start earlier, younger? How early do our out-of-school suspensions start?
So we don't break it down by grades, partly because the state, and it's really good practice when looking at data that groups are not identifiable in individual students. So as you look at building and you see our class sizes, anytime you have 20 or less in a cell size, that's too small to report publicly. But we probably could. This is all blind data, so because we aren't entitled to know who receives free and reduce or are eligible, we pull this data blindly from Synergy. So I'm not sure if grade is in there, but I could take a look at that, see where we're at.
Generally, how early do we look? Do we look into elementary, or is
We do. Yep, this is K-12 data.
And when they are, when our students, any students, are in school suspension, are they provided any kind of teaching support?
Yes. So, typically when a student is in the office, if they're going to be there for any length of time, the teachers are asked to send materials down. And out-of-school suspension, we always try to provide materials by the end of the day, and if it's going to be an extended length of time, an extended length of materials to cover. I don't know, Angie, if and Neil, and pretty common practice where teachers are asked to bring materials to the office for so-and-so.
So is it kind of like if you were sick, it would be those same kind of materials to catch you up on homework and things?
Yes, I think for the most part, a suspension is going to be quick, and nobody really has time to prepare an additional lesson for that student, so it's, for the most part, sending that same lesson home as much as possible. The Chromebook allows us some opportunities, 612, to be able to make that happen.
My concern is, and I know from all of the workshops that I've gone to up at the conference, is whenever a student is out of the classroom, they're not learning. And so when it is a poverty student, they don't always have that support at home or the support in their life to fill in those gaps. And so, if we send those students, whether it's to the office or home, with a pile of homework, and perhaps these students are not, maybe they're not even, proficient to start with, and then we leave them on their own, it just, to me, feels like a huge snowball effect of frustration and helplessness and not learning. And so that has always been my concern with suspension. So, and especially when they're out of school suspension, that not only affects not learning when they're in school, but it also it has this alienation aspect to it where they are not part of the body, they're not part of the group that's here learning. And I understand there's all the reasons why certain things need to happen, but we obviously have issues in several of our schools, if not all of them, with grades reaching where we would have our goals to be. And I think this may be one way where we could help stop that gap. If we can support these students more, whatever it is, if they are in school suspension, to have some kind of actual, either whether it's a para or someone who can help them have some learning during that time rather than just sitting on their own, or when they're out of school suspension to have fewer of those, number one, and then to support learning during those times, I believe will help that student in the long run exponentially.
On that, you mentioned, talking about teachers giving kids instruction. I know at my school district, teachers' time is limited, but usually you'll see whenever a teacher is bringing that material down, they are spending as much time, because they know that student well, to give them as much as they can in that minimal amount of time so they can successfully complete that assignment. Sometimes it's not enough, but I know that that's tried, and I also know that most or all teachers, kids coming back, okay, let me catch you up. So it's not ideal, and it's certainly not perfect, and probably exactly what you're asking for, but I think most or all teachers do the best that they can to give whatever they can to help.
Sorry. I would be interested to know how these groups then compare to our graduation rates, and which school they end up in and all that.
If you remember from last fall or last spring, our graduation rate has gone up 13% since 2013. So I think we're doing remarkable progress there. And we do have the breakdown for graduation rates in all of these that I believe we reported to the board in the spring. But we can dig that information back up.
Thank you. It's just kind of, I think that it is part of the trend that they follow through the school district, and it's just maybe something that we can shore up. We can shore up these numbers.
So probably the most common and the vast majority of our lengthy suspensions are going to be at the secondary level and more than likely at the high school level. I mean, so you have physical assault, fighting, chemicals of any sort. Those are probably the two big ones. And the Department of Ed actually takes, they have about 24 categories that they list and they report out. So they'll take our thousands of submitted items and they will whittle them down to these serious offenses. Yeah, okay.
So you would be able to break down these groups into what those would be, like how many. So let's look at one of the red groups. So you could see with that red group how many were fighting? Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be great to know, yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn then. Okay. Motion Motion's been made and seconded. Meeting's adjourned.